So we'll start, let others join in. They'll join in as they find it considerate. Okay, we'll start. So we wanted to start with the topic called climate change. So climate change has been the buzzword in the present context. We see climate change is heard over everywhere. Everyone is talking about climate change. So there are a lot of questions which are posed whether climate change is a new phenomenon or has it not happened in the past or anything like that. So my voice is audible, na, Shaila?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So climate change, everyone is asking why if climate change is happening or not. We had climate changes, like you might have heard of climate change called the Ice Age. You might have heard of this Ice Age because Ice Age, if you talk about the Pleistocene times, you have heard about the phenomenon called as Ice Age. So in Ice Age, what happened is that the temperatures dipped. The temperatures dipped so low that ice formed. Uh, the seas where the sea level went down because the ice was formed. Ice was separated away from the sea water, so the sea level went down. So still we talk about this new phenomenon about climate change. We talk about every day that climate change is happening, climate change is happening. So why do we talk about climate change? This issue about climate change is that the earlier climate changes that happened, it was more or less a natural phenomenon. But nowadays what we have seen in the recent climate change is a anthropogenic phenomenon. It's a anthropogenic phenomenon. ठीक? So why do we call it an anthropogenic phenomenon? Because we have taken parameters from the pre-industrial times, from 1850 till the present times. What we have seen is that the parameters have changed quite drastically, and because of this drastic change, we call it a human-induced climate change. It is actually a human-induced climate change. That is why when we say that climate change is happening, we are not talking about the natural climate change. Natural climate change happens because of a lot of reasons. The earth's magnetic field, this earth's magnetic field also reverses. It changes its direction like some degrees for within 10,000 years. It changes its position, the magnetic field, magnetic axis of the earth. It has also reversed. Reversal of magnetic field of the earth has also taken place. This is one phenomenon. Then the orbit of the earth, we know orbit of the earth also shifts. It is not a static phenomenon. It has shifted. So this might be one of the reason also for climate change. Okay, but these are natural phenomena that have occurred. What we are talking today is a human induced climate change. So the first question gets answered that climate change is the climate change that we talk about today is a human induced climate change. Fine. The second observation, how do you know, how do you tell others that climate change is happening? Okay, so we have some data. You might have heard about the organization called as IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They have studied several reports. I have explained in one class in geography that IPCC is an organization which does not it does not make its own report. What it does is that it analyzes the reports of various organizations, like various organizations makes report like IUCN, WWF. These are premier organizations, not NGOs, who take out who conduct researches and bring out their reports. These reports are analyzed by IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and they verify the data and then they publish their data. And we have seen lots of IPCC reports coming in. Yeah, there was a fifth assessment report of IPCC report of IPCC. There is a special assessment report of IPCC. What does they say? What do they say? They say that climate change is a phenomenon which is happening. How do they verify that it is happening? First of all, they have taken out the sea level changes. Okay, sea level changes. What they have seen in the sea level changes is that earlier sea level change was till 1990s. It was around 1.9 millimeter a year. So why the sea level was increasing at the rate of 1.9 millimeters per year? Why sea level was increasing? There are two factors. First of all, the glaciers are melting. The glaciers are melting. This is one factor. That means the water level, the water into the sea is increasing. That is why the sea levels are increasing. This is one phenomenon. The second is whenever the oceans take in the temperature, take in the global warming, and the ocean also warms up. In that case, what happens to the water? It expands, and because of that expansion, water expansion, because of that expansion also the sea levels are increasing. So these are the two prime factors because of which sea level change is happening. Nowadays, in the present times, after 1990s, what we see that the sea level is increasing at the rate of 3.2 millimeter a year. Sea level is increasing at the level of 3.2 millimeters a year. So this drastic change in sea level is basically attributed to the human induced climate change. So these induced climate change, you might have heard several countries. Amir has joined us. We are talking about climate change. Okay, you might have missed only 5 minutes. You can see the recording. I put it on recording. You can see the recorded video. Okay, so I'm talking about climate change, and why, how do you tell others that climate change is a real phenomenon? Somebody might ask you. This was asked in the UPSC interviews also, across like interviews, that how do you say that climate change is happening? Why? There must be some data, there must be some facts which ascertain that yes, climate change is happening. So this is one of the fact that sea level change is happening. Before 1990, this sea level change happened at the rate of 1.9 millimeters a year. After 1990, we say that the sea level change is happening at a faster rate of 3.2 millimeters a year, and this is induced by two factors. The two factors, main factors that are responsible for sea level change, is the melting of the glaciers because of global warming, and the second is that oceans take up almost 90% of the warming of the earth. If the earth is warming by about zero point 0.8 degrees centigrade, 90% of the temperature is taken in by the oceans. So the ocean water expands, and that leads to sea level change. Fine. So this is one of the fact that you can produce. Yes, climate change is happening. The second fact is that you might see across the extreme climatic events, this has increased. The number of extreme climatic events that you see nowadays has increased. How do you say that? The IPCC has brought out a report. It has mentioned a lot of climatic events, and they say that the number of extreme climatic events are changing. If you see the monsoon, I'll take a small example. Though it is not mandatory for a GS student to know, I'll just give an example. In monsoon, what is happening is that for the last 50 years, India's monsoon rainfall, which is around 118 centimeter of rainfall, you might know it, 118 centimeter of rainfall, that is decreasing by 1 millimeter every year. It is decreasing at the level of 1 millimeter every year. And what is happening is that the areas that used to get higher rainfall are getting much higher rainfall nowadays, much higher rainfall, and the areas which were dry earlier are becoming drier. So the drier areas are becoming drier, the wetter areas are becoming wetter. If you see, if you take an example of Cherrapunji receives a rainfall of more than 1150 centimeter. this much of rainfall Cherrapunji receives. Okay, this is the rainfall that Cherrapunji receives. But if you see the western part of uh, Rajasthan or near the Aravalis, you will see it receives hardly 15 centimeter of rainfall. Okay, the number of droughts has also increased. There are the number of droughts, you might have heard about a term called as flash droughts. Flash droughts. Flash droughts, what happen is that the water level, the soil water level, that means the water that is important for agriculture to prosper, that soil water level is decreasing at a very fast rate, and that leads to a drought like condition where agriculture is not possible. So flash droughts are happening. Okay, what other things we can say? We can talk about the glacial, we can talk about the glacial meltings. Like you might have heard that the origin of Ganga, which is near Gaumukh, uh, Gaumukh in Uttarakhand, the glacier is receding. This is not happening only in the Himalayan ranges. If you see Greenland, in Greenland, you must know the island beside. This is if you say this is UK, this is Greenland, the bigger landmass. Greenland is losing out ice at a very fast rate. The eastern segment of Greenland is almost like it has melted. Okay, if you see Antarctica, there is a huge ice shelves are breaking off. Huge ice shelves are breaking off. The one of the ice shelf was Larsen ice shelf. Larsen ice shelf. This is breaking off, and if these breaks off, what will happen? One day, will you might not find any ice over Antarctica. Another example I can give you is the example of the Arctic. Russia, you might, if you have been reading the current affairs, Russia is thinking of building like a ship route through this area, so that it can decrease the kilometers that it needs to traverse to reach the other areas. China is also thinking of building a ship route through that area. So these are various examples which portray that climate change is happening and climate change is real. Fine. We can go on giving examples and examples. So climate change is a real phenomenon. Fine. Okay, just let me. So we have talked about climate change. Okay, we'll talk about the rest of climate change, like what are the efforts that have been taken in climate change. We'll talk about those also. First of all, I've planned that we'll talk about global warming. Like global warming is a phenomenon, you might know, it's very easy. Global warming. So how does global warming happen? It's a very easy phenomenon. The Earth receives sunlight. Earth receives sunlight. You might have heard about the heat budget of the Earth. There is a Earth around 33% of the 35% of the sunlight is directly uh, reflected back as albedo. Okay, albedo, and then some amount of the sun rays, the solar insolation, if you call it solar insolation, it is absorbed by the ultraviolet, the ozone layer that you have, the ozone layer, and the rest of it comes to the earth. Around 50 comes to the earth, 50% comes to the earth, and then it is reflected back by the earth actually do not reflect it back, the earth absorbs it. It absorbs the shortwave radiations, and then it radiates as long wave radiations. These long wave radiations are then caught by the larger molecules such as carbon dioxide, water vapor, and CH4, methane. These are the air molecules which trap this long wave, and they do not allow these long wave radiations to escape. And if they do not allow these long wave radiations to escape, what happens in turn is that they absorb the radiation and then they reflect it back to the earth. They absorb the radiation, then they reflect it back to the earth. This is what is happening, and because of this, heat is trapped. Heat is trapped. and because of this heat, trapping of heat, the earth is livable. First of all, because of this trapping, earth is livable. Otherwise we might have had, just a second, I'll admit someone. Yeah, because of this earth is livable. Otherwise earth would be like very cold, like you have seen the Martian surface. It is a very cold surface, fine. The Martian surface, the earth is livable because of the atmosphere that we have, and these gases are known as greenhouse gases. Okay, these gases are known as greenhouse gases. uh, a very common question in the UPSC is the global warming potential of these greenhouse gases. You might note it down. Carbon dioxide has the lowest among these. Then we have water vapor, or water vapor, they do not classify it. We have CH4, methane. Then we have N2O. Then we have this uh, HFC, PFC, and SF6. This is carbon dioxide, this is methane, this is nitrous oxide, this is hydrofluorocarbon, this is perfluorocarbon, this is sulfur hexafluoride. The global warming potential increases along this way. Fine. So these are the gases which are mostly in 2019 UPSC prelims also, I guess they have asked a question on the global warming potential of these gases. So you might note it down. Okay, this is how the global warming is happening. First of all, another important fact that I want to portray before you is that what has happened to the carbon dioxide gas. Carbon dioxide gas in the pre-industrial levels, which is the 1850 levels, we had seen that carbon dioxide was in the levels of around 290 parts per million in the atmospheric air. Atmospheric air, as you know, consists of 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 0.94% argon. These are the constituent gases, and out of it, carbon dioxide constituted 290 parts per million. Fine. Now in 2020s, what you see is that carbon dioxide has reached almost 420 parts per million. So the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is increased hugely, and there are several reasons because of the release, because which carbon dioxide has been released into the atmosphere. The fossil fuels, the fossil fuel burning, almost every other burning produces carbon dioxide in some quantity or the other. The vehicles are one of the prime contributors, the industries are prime contributors, you can say. So these are prime contributors to the release of carbon dioxide gas, and this increased carbon dioxide is leading to what? This increased carbon dioxide is leading to, the carbon dioxide is increased, fine. First thing is carbon dioxide has increased. What is it leading to? It is increased, leading to increased trapping of this long wave radiations that are long wave radiations that are released from the earth. Fine. These long, if they release, absorb more radiation, what will they do? They'll release more radiation, and that way heating will happen. Now if heating happens, we call that global warming. Now global warming is happening, global, because of global warming, what will happen? Glaciers will melt, glaciers will melt, oceans will expand, oceans will expand. Now oceans and together with glaciers contain around 90% of the carbon. Fine. Now if glaciers will melt, what will happen to this 90% of the carbon? Some percentage will be released into the atmosphere, and if this some percentage is released into the atmosphere, it will react with oxygen to produce carbon dioxide, and if it produces carbon dioxide, there will be more carbon dioxide, and this is a never ending phenomenon of global warming. This is the vicious cycle of global warming. Fine. So we have talked about global warming. What will now we have talked about the greenhouse effect. Now we'll talk about some part like related to this. We'll talk about ocean acidification. Ocean acidification. Okay. Now what is ocean acidification? It is a commonly used term that ocean is getting acidified. First of all, what is the pH level of oceans? It is around 8. As you all know, less than 7 is acidic, and more than 7 we call it basic or alkaline. Fine. But still at the pH of 8, we call that ocean is getting acidified. Acidification is actually the progression and not the absolute number. So what is happening is that the pH is decreasing. It has decreased by 0.1. So what is happening? The progressive acidification is happening to the oceans. So first, the next important thing that we would like to know is that how is this ocean getting acidified? The ocean is getting acidified because of this high percentage of carbon dioxide. What happens to this carbon dioxide? Last time also I talked about that ocean water or any water has dissolved gases. You see dissolved oxygen, which is taken up by the gills of the fishes for which they survive, how they survive. There are dissolved carbon dioxide. The dissolution process takes place to the air water interface. Fine. Also there is another process by which see, if there is a green plant, what will it do? It will take up carbon dioxide and release oxygen. That way oxygen can also be added to the water. But the basic process is mostly through ocean, water, air, water interface, and through this interface only most of the carbon dioxide is added to the oceans. Now huge amount of carbon dioxide is added to this ocean. This reacts with water to produce carbonic acid, H2CO3, carbonic acid. And this carbonic acid, what happens is that it breaks down into HCO3 and H plus, and this H plus is what is responsible for acidification of the ocean. Fine. This is leading to acidification of oceans. Now H plus, we all know pH. How is it calculated? It is log of H plus. Okay. So H plus is increasing, and that is why ocean is getting acidified. Now consequent what is the consequence of this ocean getting acidified? Fine. The consequence of ocean getting acidified is what I talked about. The first important thing I'll talk about is the corals. What has happened to the corals? I've also already talked about that corals are coral polyps who live in association with the algae called as zooxanthellae. Fine. Coral polyps live in association with an algae called as zooxanthellae. As I talked about in the last class, the coral reefs are formed of what? Carbonate molecules. It is basically calcium carbonate molecules. Now if there is increase of HCO3 minus molecules and there is dearth of carbonate 2 minus molecules, what you will see is that this process will be not happening. This formation of coral reefs will stop because they will not find carbonate molecules. Calcium carbonate will not form. If calcium carbonate does not form, coral reefs will not form. And coral reefs, we already know they are the rainforests of the ocean. They have the highest biodiversity. One of the highest biodiversity is there in the coral reefs. Fine. Because it has a lot of nutrients around it. There are a lot of aquatic plants also grow around it. So it is very highly biodiverse, and because of this high biodiversity they are also called as the rainforest of the oceans. Fine. So the first important effect will happen on the coral polyps. If this happens, what will happen? As I have already told you in the last class, that almost 30% of the tourism that happens around the world, 30% of the tourism happens around the world is beach tourism. Beach tourism, and many of this beach tourism is due to this coral reefs. You see Lakshadweep, Andaman, they receive a lot of tourists, mostly foreign tourists, who come to see these coral islands. So tourism revenue will go down. Fine. The first important aspect is that biodiversity will go down, tourism revenue will also go down. The next is that oceans, if they get more acidified, what will happen to the aquatic animals? They'll obviously die down, because increased acidification will lead to what? The fishes not finding a habitable environment to live in, the aquatic plants will not find a habitable environment to live in, so most of them will die down, which will lead to the formation of what I told you, dead zones. and dead zones will be hypoxic zones. Hypoxic zones will lead to death of more aquatic animals, and this way the vicious cycle will continue. Okay, I believe you have understood what is till here ocean acidification, global warming, and some bit of climate change. Have you understood?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay. Who's this? Amir. You have understood. Antara, what about you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and Shaila, what about you? Okay, we might have lost connection with him. Okay, fine. We'll go on. Now there is another
Yes, sir.
term. Yeah, okay, okay. You have understood, na? Fine. Will
Yes, sir.
another term which is related. We will understand this term is known as carbon sequestration. You might have heard about carbon sequestration. Carbon sequestration is a term which has gained increased significance in the nowadays because of this increase in carbon dioxide concentration in the air. Because of this increased carbon dioxide concentration from around 294 parts per million, 294 parts per million to 420 parts per million, the carbon sequestration has come into like it has come into global debates. So what is carbon sequestration? Carbon sequestration is capture of carbon. We want to capture the carbon. We want to store the carbon in some place, in some place which will affect the atmospheric condition, and it will reduce the atmospheric carbon dioxide. Okay, so carbon sequestration is what? You capture the carbon, you store the carbon in some place where which leads to decrease in the atmospheric carbon dioxide. And if atmospheric carbon dioxide is decreased, that is the whole objective of preventing the climate change happening. That is the whole objective. So carbon sequestration is very important. So how do you do carbon sequestration? Carbon sequestration can be done in several ways. Okay, there are three main ways which the people have debated all this while. This is the oceanic sequestration. There is one called geologic sequestration, and there is one called terrestrial sequestration. Okay, what do how do oceanic sequestration happen? Oceanic sequestration is basically what they do is that they use some chemicals, they chemic to capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They take captures the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere using some like adsorption methods of adsorption. Might have heard about adsorption. It's a scientific process through which carbon dioxide is captured, and what they do is that they pump it into the oceans. They pump it into the oceans, into the deep oceans. Deep ocean, let's say Arctic, in the deeper parts of the Arctic, so that it does not come in contact with the atmosphere. Okay, that is how oceanic sequestration happens. In geologic sequestration, what happens is that you might have lots of fossil fuel destinations where fossil fuel extraction has finished. Now what they do is that they'll put a lid on it, they'll put some mud on it, and it'll remain there. What they do is that they take up this captured carbon dioxide and they pump it in the uh, extinguished like fossil fuel wells, and then they put this uh, cover over it, a cover of mud or some other equipments they use. They might use iron and all to cover these wells, fossil fuel wells. Okay, that is how geologic sequestration happens. Terrestrial sequestration has gained more significance due to easier way in which this can happen. One way in which carbon sequestration through terrestrial means can happen is called as green carbon. Another way it is called as blue carbon. So what happens in green carbon? See, green carbon is basically nothing but carbon absorbed by the trees. Okay, the bigger trees. What they will do is that, as we all know, in the process of photosynthesis, what happened? Carbon dioxide is taken up by the plants, and they break down this carbon dioxide into carbon hydrocarbon bonds, and then they use it for their own like growth. They build these branches, and all these are all made of hydrocarbons, and some bit of hydrocarbons are also the fruits and all that we eat. These are hydrocarbons, basically carbon bonds only. So what happens? Carbon dioxide is taken up, photosynthesis, food preparation takes place, and this carbon, that the carbon that is stored in the trees, or the carbon that is stored in the roots, this carbon is called as green carbon. Okay, the carbon that is captured and stored by the plants is known as green carbon. They might store it in the roots, they might store it in the bodies. Like many of the places you might have heard that wetlands, peatlands. There are peatlands. There is one near Congo, where there is a large scale land use change that is happening, and people are resisting this land use change because this peatland. What is peatland? Peatland is nothing but used up or older trees which has fallen down, and they have created a peat. Okay, because of inner what happens is that water, just a second, water, if the water level is not very high, these logs would fall down after a period of time, say 50 60 years. These logs of wood will fall down, and because of anaerobic decomposition and aerobic decomposition, they remain as peats in these water bodies. These are kind of wetlands also. Okay, so these peatlands are of great significance in terms of having serving as storage capacity of green carbon. Fine. Now, what is blue carbon? Blue carbon is nothing carbon that is stored in the oceans, the water bodies. That is known as blue carbon. Blue carbon can also be stored by mangroves. Mangroves also take up carbon dioxide, undergo photosynthesis, and that carbon might also be stored in the oceans. Fine. That carbon might also be stored in the oceans. That way, blue carbon can also be stored. So this is the terrestrial method of carbon sequestration.
Sir, I have a
Yeah.
doubt, sir.
Okay.
Sir,
Please.
please,
So
please explain about these mangroves.
okay. What are
What are
mangroves?
what? Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Mangroves. Okay, I'll explain. Mangroves are a special variety of trees. Okay, there are a number of trees which by different names, species, they called it by different scientific names. Okay, uh, these these are a basic classification of trees. What happens here is that these mangroves, they generally grow in which places? They grow in the estuary regions, the rivers, they meet the seas. This is the estuary region. Fine. In this region, you'll see a lot of mangroves also grow along the coastal areas. This is the coast. You will find a lot of mangroves. Okay, these are a classification of trees. How, why they are classified as special type of tree? The first important thing is that they can grow in higher salinity. Just a
So
second.
basically, this is a kind of marshy land,
Yeah,
marshy region.
marshy places are mostly peatlands. Those are not actually marine. Okay, marshy lands may
Okay.
not be marine, but
Okay.
mangroves generally grow in higher salinity waters. They generally grow in brackish waters. Okay, brackish water is around 33 parts per thousand. That amount of salinity is there. In that salinity, mangroves grow. Okay, because they can, the special capability of mangroves is that they can grow in salty water. That is why they grow in salty water. The
Okay.
plant.
Okay.
Okay, that is why have you understood mangroves?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, actually, what they have to do, they have to do two special characteristics. One thing is that they have to take in air. The roots might not be able to absorb air because the roots are underneath the water. Okay, they have to absorb air, so they have a special type of root which absorbs air from the atmosphere. Fine,
Hmm.
for their own respiration. And the other thing is that they have to take in water, okay, from this saline water. So what they do is that they have special type of hair which expel the salt, and they take in the fresh water. Okay, this is the basic phenomenon that how a mangrove tree operates. Two important characteristic. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so mangroves. So what we have talked about is terrestrial, green carbon and blue carbon. Fine. So the next thing that we'll talk about is this carbon credit and carbon offsetting. So we'll talk about first. We'll come to this topic of climate change. We have already talked about, but we'll talk about the global debates that are happening about climate change. Okay. So climate change has been accepted nowadays, like though US President Trump denies that climate change is happening, but it is an accepted phenomenon across different parts of the world. Most affected countries around the world are these islands, these small islands like Fiji. Fiji, they say we have an agreement with Maldives. If you know, we have an agreement with Maldives that if Maldives go under sea or the ocean, we'll take in all the Maldives citizen by 2100. By 2100, we have an agreement with them. So these small islands are at the highest risk. They are at the highest risk of facing the brunt of climate change. So climate change, prevention of climate change, mitigation of climate change has been a global debate. Mitigation of climate change. So climate change, the first of all, I would like to give you a history. The first basic conference about on environment, if you say, started in the year 1972. You might have heard about Stockholm Conference, when people started talking about environment. Okay, Stockholm Conference. And after that, we have had a lot of conferences which actually tried to talk about the different issues that are there in the environment, basically the environmental issues, and they have tried to project a global debate so that people participate and then we find a logical outcome out of it. The most important event that happened in the field of environmental uh, negotiation, we can call it, is the 1992 Rio Earth Summit. Rio Earth Summit. So what happened in this Rio Earth Summit? People, countries came out, almost 190, 200 countries came to this Rio Earth Summit, and some of the landmark decisions that we see today had its roots in the Rio Earth Summit. The UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, sees its birth in the Rio Earth Summit. Fine. Now, what is this UNFCCC? UNFCCC is a convention, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So it's basically a convention on which countries came together and they tried to participate in the basic debate on climate change. Fine. These parties are known as COP, the Conference of Parties. Okay, this is called as Conference of Parties. These are the parties to the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. What is a framework? Framework is the basic architecture that how you will debate climate change. Okay, there is a framework that we will meet every year and then we'll discuss climate change. Fine, that is the UNFCCC, and the parties to that framework convention is known as the Conference of Parties. This was a landmark decision that we had, you might see several types of convention. These are convention or the BIMSTEC convention. These are what? These are basically talking platforms. Okay, platforms where you talk and debate about the issues that you have. UNFCCC was the first specialized body which was focused on climate change. Fine, and most of the countries around the world joined this framework convention. So they had to operationalize the framework convention. How to operationalize a framework convention is set aside some rules. These rules are set up in what do you call it? You call it protocol. Okay, you call it protocol. So you have set some rules. These rules need to be operationalized, and these rules are operationalized under some protocol. That protocol is uh, is what the first important protocol that you see is known as the Kyoto Protocol. So Kyoto Protocol came about in 1997. Okay, Kyoto Protocol came about in 1997. But what was Kyoto Protocol? First of all, we'll discuss what was Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol was a protocol which wanted the industrialized nations, because what happens is that till from 1850 to present, we'll see the industrialized nations are those who are responsible for climate change. If you see the carbon, because see, India did not have industries still. uh, Now what we see, our industrial contribution is around 30, only about 30% of the GDP comes from the industrial sector. Also manufacturing, if you see it, only 16% of the GDP comes from manufacturing sector. So we are not an industrialized nation. We have not, our industrialization has not progressed. The national manufacturing policy says that we want to build it to 25%, but we have still in 10 years we have only increased by 1%. So we are not an industrialized nation. Okay, if we are not an industrialized nation, basically we have not contributed to the huge the carbon dioxide that have been emitted. But who has contributed to this huge carbon dioxide discharge? This is has been contributed by the industrialized nations. These industrialized nations have contributed to the increasing carbon dioxide. If you still see the current emission rates, at current emission rates, 20% of the emission is contributed by China now. Almost 20% is contributed by China, around 18% is contributed by USA. But historically, if you see, only around 20% has been contributed by USA alone. Okay, historically. The current trends are different because we are industrializing. China has industrialized a lot. So the current trends are different. Now also we have contribute only 6% of the global carbon emissions. Now, if you see historically, most of it has been contributed by the developed nations. And who are these developed nations? US, the countries of European Union, Canada, countries like Japan. These have been the main contributors to climate change. So Kyoto Protocol recognized this basic agenda, and they set up CBDR mechanism. Okay, common but differentiated responsibility. It is a common responsibility of countering climate change, but it is a differentiated responsibility of taking differentiated responsibility. That means the responsibility of decreasing the carbon levels is more upon the developed nations and less upon the developing nations. Fine, or the least developed countries. Fine. So Kyoto recognized this protocol and they set up a mechanism that there were some countries which were named in Annex B, Annexure B. These were the countries which were responsible for reducing their carbon emissions. Who were these countries? They were industrialized countries. They were developed countries. And what was the responsibility? That they had to decrease their carbon emissions by some percentage according to a base year. And because of this differentiated responsibility, many developed nations pulled back from this Kyoto Protocol. US did not join. There are several other countries who did not want to participate in this Kyoto Protocol. So Kyoto Protocol set up a mechanism which we need to understand the mechanism how carbon emission were to be decreased. Okay. First of all, they set up a carbon trading mechanism. So how does this is very important. Try to understand how carbon trading mechanism works. Okay. Carbon trading mechanism works in this way that a developed country, say a developed country, has been given a responsibility of decreasing their carbon by 100 units. We are talking about units, fine. How will they do it? How will they reduce their carbon emission? They have to reduce their carbon emission. How will they reduce? They have three basic principles. They can do it by three basic ways. First, they can do it in their own country. Fine. They can do it in another country who is also obligated to reduce their carbon emission. Another country, this country is also obligated to reduce their carbon emissions. Okay. Or they can do it in a developing country which is not obligated to reduce their carbon emissions. Fine. In this mechanism where the developed country builds a project in another developed country which is also obligated to reduce their carbon emission, we call it joint implementation. Okay, have you understood joint implementation? This is very important.
Yes, sir, got it.
Okay, rest of you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Shaila?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is joint implementation. Now, this is a developing country. A developed country implementing a project in developing country which is not obligated to reduce their carbon emission. This is known as the clean development mechanism. Okay, CDM, clean development mechanism. So we have understood what is joint implementation. We have understood what is clean development mechanism. Okay, this way another thing is that this developed country, suppose in year 2000, I'll take years of 2008. So it can only it has emitted around 100 units. In 2009 it has been given an obligation to emit only 80 units. Fine. Have you understood this assumption? I'm taking an assumption that in 2008 they have emitted 100 units. In 2009 they had to reduce by 20 units, so they had to emit only 80 units. Fine. Now if they do not emit 80 units, suppose they reduce their industrialization capacity, they start renewable energy projects, they'll start several kind of projects which reduce the carbon emission intensity. Fine. And they do not emit 80 units, they emit only 76 units. So what will they have? They have been assigned 80 units, they have emitted 76 units. So this rest of it, 4 units, this comes out as assigned amount units. Okay, this assigned amount units. Have you understood what is assigned amount unit? If you understand assigned amount unit, this 4 unit that I am talking about, unit is 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. Fine. This unit is termed as 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. Fine. So this assigned, you have been obligated to emit 80 units. You have not done. You have done only 76. You have 4 extra units. Fine. This extra unit, some other country might have done what? They have been assigned say 20 units and they have emitted 28 units. Okay. So they have crossed their own limit. They have crossed their own limit by 8. What they have to do is that they'll have to buy these units. Okay. Because this country has not emitted their own. What they'll do is that they'll sell these 4 units to this country B. This country A will sell these units to country B. Then this will lead to carbon trading. Okay. The same thing can happen here also. Like suppose this developed country implements a project in developing country which saves around 20 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. Okay, they'll get 20 what? They'll get 20 certified emission reduction units. These units can also be sold in the carbon trading mechanism. Okay, and if it if you complete a project in another developed country which was obligated, you do a project called joint implementation. And in this joint implementation, if you earn if you save 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent, you will get one emission reduction unit, and this unit can also be sold on the carbon market. And who are emitting extra, they'll have to buy, and who are emitting less, they can sell their units. Fine. And obviously there is a big role of technology transfer. So if you have the technology, you can implement lots of projects in the developing countries, and that way you can earn certified emission reduction unit. So have you understood this part?
Sir, what is
Yes.
emission reduction unit exactly? Didn't get it.
Okay, okay, I'll
One
explain
reduction.
emission. Okay, oh, emission reduction. Suppose you are a developed country A. Fine, you are a developed country A. You have taken up a project in in another developed country B. I'm talking about developed. Okay, this mechanism is termed as joint implementation. I'm sure you have understood till here.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes. So what you do is that you, after implementing this project, and because of this project, you save say 5 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. Okay, you
Okay, sir.
save this much, you save this much. You might have wanted to build a coal based electricity plant. What you have done is that you have introduced renewables, and you have reduced this amount, 5 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. Fine. This 5 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent is what is termed as emission reduction unit. This 1 ton is termed as one emission reduction unit. So 5 ton is termed as 5 emission reduction unit.
It
Fine.
can also be sold, sir.
Huh?
Sold. It can also be sold, sir.
This can also be sold. Everything, certified emission reduction unit, or assigned amount unit. All of this can be sold on the carbon market.
Okay, sir.
Fine. The rest of you, have you understood?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Shaila and Antara?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So have your doubts been cleared? Like Kyoto must be very easy for you now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Shaila and Antara, how about Kyoto?
Yes.
Kyoto is easy now.
Yes.
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 So I tried to explain Kyoto. See, this is what is Kyoto, and beyond this, do not need to understand anything. Kyoto. I'll set up some this Kyoto was set up like it came into force like any international agreement. Okay, and in any international agreement they mention that if 50 countries or 25 countries, they mention a cutoff number, that if this many countries join, the protocol or the convention will come into force. Fine. The Kyoto Protocol came into force in 2005, and the project years that started from 2008 to 2012. Fine. This was the first Kyoto Protocol. The second Kyoto Protocol started from 2012, that means the end of 2012 to 2020. And after 2020, what we see is that Paris Agreement has come into force. Paris Agreement. Fine. So Kyoto is done now. Kyoto is over. We have come to Paris Agreement. Okay, this way Kyoto is one of the protocols. Fine. So in 1992, you have the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and in 1997, you developed the Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol. And after these lots of debate have taken place. COP 13, COP 12, 15, COP 20, all of these have taken place. Copenhagen, these are basically like several like every year there is a COP. You might all know the last one was cancelled because of COVID. In 2020 there was no COP. Okay. In 2019, the last COP was held in Madrid, if I'm not wrong. It was held at Madrid. Every year there is a conference of parties. Fine. So that way COP13, COP14 and all took place, where various kinds of climate change negotiations took place. There was Copenhagen, there was Doha, there was this Cancun summit in 2010. That way 2013 you had the Lima summit, 2014 you had the Warsaw summit, 2015 we had a breakthrough year in Paris. What I'll tell you is that these COPs are small COPs. You go through the COPs. I see if I have to explain every other COP, it will take me like 2 3 hours to explain only the COPs. So that way it's not possible. What I have done is that I've tried to explain the main parts. What you can do at home is that you read through these small COPs, the Cancun summit, the Lima summit, the Warsaw summit, the Copenhagen summit. Read through all this. There are 2 3 liners only. You'll get to understand. Okay, there are some funds also which you will know: the Green Climate Fund, Green Climate Fund. This was, I'll explain this Green Climate Fund. All the developed countries, what they told is that they'll try to mobilize $100 billion. Okay, $100 billion every year, which will fund climate change mitigation and mitigation. Okay, it'll fund climate change mitigation. So they set up a climate change fund, Green Climate Fund, and this Green Climate Fund has its headquarters at Seoul in Korea. Okay, in Korea it's not exactly at Seoul, it is in Korea. Okay, it is there in Korea. The headquarters is there, and this actually they committed that they'll contribute 100 billion per dollars per year, but they have still managed only around 20 to 30 billion dollars, and still they have not produced the actual amount. Okay, US have had pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement, and after the Biden administration came into effect, they have again joined the Paris Climate Agreement. So lots of confusion in climate change negotiation. Just a second. Okay, so this was one fund, Green Climate Fund. There is another fund which is known as the Global Environmental Facility, right? This also funds UNFCCC. This is a fund set up under the World Bank. Okay, Global Environment Facility. Read through this Global Environment Facility, which it actually funds a lot of initiatives such as this Minamata Convention. Also, it funds UNCCD also, United Nations Convention on this desertification. Uh, Desertification. It funds UNFCCC. So these Global Environmental Facility was actually set up under the World Bank. World Bank is the trustee, so they fund all these initiatives, the environmental initiatives. Fine. The Global Environmental Facility. The Green Climate Fund is another important fund. It has been asked in UPSC 2016. Yes, the Green Climate Fund. The Paris Agreement. 2015 we had the landmark Paris Agreement. Now, what is landmark about the Paris Climate Agreement? The first thing about Paris Climate Agreement is that everyone came together and they said that whatever we are doing for climate change, the Kyoto Protocol or any other thing that we are doing for climate change is not enough for to restrict the rise in temperature of the earth by 2 3 4 degrees. It may happen by 4 degrees also. So the Paris Climate Agreement came out with a basic text which mentioned that the parties to the UNFCCC, the parties, what they'll try to do is that they'll try to restrict the increase of temperature of the earth by 2 degrees centigrade by 2100. This is the target they have taken. Okay, they'll actually try to limit it to 1.5 degrees centigrade rise from pre-industrial levels, that is 1850, by 2100. So they came out with a very specific target based agreement known as the Paris Climate Agreement. So this is a huge initiative that you will do anything, you will take up several steps. What these steps will do is that they'll actually limit the temperature rise the global warming by 1.5 degrees centigrade till 2100. Okay, so how will you do this? How will you operationalize this thing? So they have come out with a specific intervention called as nationally determined contribution. It is actually intended nationally determined contribution. What is intended nationally determined contribution? So earlier we have learned in Kyoto that Kyoto recognized the principle of CBDR. The, it was a differentiated responsibility. Okay, differentiated responsibility. Now what the developed countries told is that the countries like China, countries like India, they are also contributing to huge climate change, because now I have already mentioned these facts that China contributes to almost 20% of the global carbon emissions now. India contributes around 6% of the global carbon emissions now. So these are huge contributors now, not historically, now, the present. So the developed countries came up and said that why are we only responsible for climate change? If though they are historically responsible, but they argued that if if you want us to do it, you have to do it also. So they have come up with this phenomenon that if you want us to do it, you also have to do it. Okay. So this led to what? This led to this thing, the intended nationally determined contribution. Everyone was told that you determine nationally that you have this much capacity. Like, you cannot decrease carbon emissions over the night. What you have to do? You have to develop capacity. Capacity for what? Capacity for renewable energy, renewables, capacity for energy efficiency, capacity for energy efficiency, capacity for several other projects. Fine. Several other projects, like you might not be using more of carbon, because carbon leads to carbon dioxide. You might not use lots of fossil fuels. Like fossil fuel, if you have to decrease the intake of fossil fuels, what you have to do? You have to develop very efficient, highly efficient engines. The current IC engine efficiency is around only 35%. So you have to develop higher efficiency engine. And if this you have to do, you need higher levels of technology. So renewables, you have to do, you need solar panels. Solar panels are mostly imported into India from China and US. So we do not have the technology to do it. In IC engines, though we are manufacturing it, but increasing the efficiency is another important task that we have to invest into. R&D has to take place, then only we can do it. So the Paris Agreement said that you determine nationally what is your capacity to decrease, and that way what you do is that you announce that these are the steps that will take nationally to decrease the carbon emission intensity, and it was equally applicable to everyone. Fine. Equally applicable to everyone, even the developed countries or the developing countries also. Fine. So these steps you had to take. India announced three basic steps. If you know, I'll say that 40% of the energy of India will come from renewables by 2030. This is what India announced. By 2030, 40% of the renewables will come energy will come from renewables. Currently, you might see that almost 22% comes from renewables, solar energy, wind energy, and different kinds of other kinds of energy. Biomass, small hydro, waste to energy, wind, solar. You might have heard about several initiatives such as rooftop solar initiative. You might have heard about solar parks. These are basically India's commitment to this nationally determined contribution. You have committed to the world that will do this. So India is investing. By 2022, India has taken its own target that by 2022 will develop around 175 gigawatt of renewable capacity. If you are going through the current affairs, this is what India promised. Fine. 175 gigawatts of renewable energy. Is India has also promised that we'll develop around 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon sink. What is a carbon sink? It is same as green carbon. Okay, carbon sink is nothing but basically green carbon, blue carbon. Those are carbon sinks. Fine. They take up the carbon from the atmosphere and they store it. That is a carbon sink. How will you do this 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon sink? You plant more trees. So India is going up in the afforestation policy. If you see the national afforestation policy, India is uh, increasingly focused to increase the green cover to 33% of the area. Fine. If you are the forest survey reports, if you are going through, India already has around 24.56% of the total area under green cover. Fine. The forest cover and the tree cover, if you add them up. The third thing that India said is that we'll decrease our carbon emission intensity by 25 to 30%. Okay, this is the decrease in the carbon emission intensity. And how will you decrease this carbon emission intensity? We'll obviously develop energy efficient appliances. That is how you will do it. So if you see all your appliances at home, if you see the geyser, if you see the AC, all of the appliances, you see the star ratings. Have you seen all the star ratings? The star ratings are basically what? Their star ratings are basically meant to save on energy. These are energy efficiency. If you have heard about green buildings are nothing but energy saving buildings, buildings that save energy. If you see green rating, Griha, the housing assessment report, Griha, that is what? Nothing but star rating of houses, you can call them. So those are nothing but energy efficiency. So 25 to 30% carbon intensity, if you have to decrease, you have to move to cleaner fuels. So we are moving to BS6. If you know, we are moving to BS6 in vehicles. BS6. Fine. Just a second. Sorry. Okay, we are moving to BS6 in vehicles, but in BS6, what we have done, we are in decreasing the sulfur emission. We are decreasing different kinds of emission. We are decreasing the fuel. We are increasing the fuel efficiency also. Uh, Fuel efficiency. There is another term called the minimum fuel efficiency. Nowadays they have tried to increase that also. They have mandated a standard also. I'm forgetting the name. uh, there is a efficiency initiative also. Okay, so these are the various ways through which India is trying to operationalize its nationally determined contribution. Fine. So every country has come up with its nationally determined contribution. What is the caveat in nationally determined contribution? Nationally determined contribution, if you have announced something, say you have announced, assume that you have announced 100. In the next iteration, after 5 years, what you will have to do is that you have to announce something more than 100. Okay, if you have announced something, say you have announced that we'll do it 25 to 30%, next time you cannot say that we'll do it by 10%. You have to do it by 50%. You have to progressively increase your this uh, targets have to progressively increase. And how will you monitor these targets? The Paris Agreement has set up a body which will monitor this. They'll take up reports from the country and they'll validate those reports. Fine. Paris Agreement is also trying to come up with a market mechanism. Just as we talked in the Kyoto Protocol, though the details of this market mechanism have not been agreed to, but this has not been agreed to by all countries. That is why it has not been operationalized. But it will be operationalized maybe in the next iteration. If this year Paris, this year another COP happens, they'll try to operationalize the market mechanism. So keep an eye on this. How they'll try to set out some rules. You have to know these rules. Okay, These are very important. The UPSC has a tendency to ask these questions. Fine. So this is how Paris Agreement is happening. Okay. Paris Agreement. After Paris Agreement, they have taken up to few more agreements. You might have heard about Madrid. You might have heard about Bonn, but those are small. Which Bonn, Madrid, they are trying. What they are trying to do is they are trying to operationalize the Paris Agreement. And from 2020 onwards, Paris Agreement has been operationalized. Fine. So this much is fine, I guess. So this is what has taken place in the field of climate change mostly. Okay. uh, we will though there are some few more things in climate change, we'll do till here only. These are the important sections that you see in climate change. Okay. We'll do another thing. We'll have to discuss one another important thing is ozone. Like, what is ozone? Okay. uh, we have talked about ozone gas, ozone level, ozone the ozone level is decreasing about above the Antarctic, the Arctic. Okay. You if you know the atmospheric differentiation, this is this lower part is known as the troposphere, this is the tropopause, and this is the stratosphere. From around 16 kilometer to around 50 kilometer, this is the stratosphere. Fine. And if this is the stratosphere, what you have is this ozone molecules over here. Okay. This is the ozone layer. This is the ozone layer. Ozone layer. So what has happened to this ozone layer? What has happened is that there are a few chemicals which the uh, countries are now trying to outlaw so that the ozone layer is healed. See, ozone layer, what does ozone layer do? There are UV rays. There are three types of UV rays. There are UVA, UVB, and UVC. Okay. B and C are very harmful. Okay. So these ozone layer tries to protect us from these UV rays. Fine. Otherwise, if ozone layer would not have been there, we would have been exposed to UV rays, which can lead to skin cancer and several other kinds of diseases. Fine. So this ozone layer protects this from this UV layer, UV emissions. Now, ozone layer, what has happened is that ozone in the ozone layer, progressively what happens is oxygen and a nascent oxygen combines to form ozone. Then ozone also disintegrates in this way, and this is a continuously occurring phenomenon. Okay, oxygen to nascent oxygen and nascent oxygen and to ozone, and then ozone to oxygen and nascent oxygen. Okay, this is a continuously occurring phenomenon in the stratospheric layer. Now what happens is that if a foreign particle means particles like chlorine, particles like bromine, if these particles come into this layer, what they do is that they combine with nascent oxygen to form ClO. And this process of oxygen and ozone converting into oxygen and nascent oxygen converting into ozone, and then the decomposition, this process is stopped. And this process, and because of this process, if it is stopped, what will happen? More of oxygen will remain. This nascent oxygen will combine with chlorine and form chlorine oxide. If chlorine oxide is formed and oxygen remains, there will be dearth of ozone. And this is what is known as ozone, thinning of ozone layer. What you say, if the concentration of ozone goes on decreasing, that is what is known as thinning of ozone layer. And this phenomenon has been promoted by these kind of molecules such as chlorine and bromine. And who releases these particles like chlorine and bromine? The refrigerators, air conditioners, the cooling agents that they used earlier. Now the cooling agent used is R32. Earlier there were some others like CCl4, carbon tetrachloride, and several other types of refrigerants were used which were very harmful to this ozone layer. And that is why the ozone layer thinned. So when did the world take notice of this? There was a very progressive thinning in the Antarctic section, Antarctica. And scientists saw this, that there is progressive thing in the Antarctic. So what they did is that they tried to bring the attention of the global community towards this issue of ozone layer thinning. And what the global body did is that they called a convention known as Vienna Convention. They called a convention known as Vienna Convention. In this Vienna Convention, it was what UNFCCC is to, or the Rio Earth Summit, which combined in 1992, is to climate change. The Vienna Convention is to ozone. Fine. What they did is that they tried to outlaw the use of these refrigerants. Carbon tetrachloride was also used on these perfume bottles. Those were also responsible for ozone layer depletion. They try to outlaw, and how you cannot outlaw it one day, but what you have to do is that you have to introduce a new refrigerant. You have to introduce a new refrigerant. Fine. So the best thing about this Vienna Convention, Vienna Convention had some rules also. These rules were formulated in the Montreal Protocol. Vienna Convention is of 1985. Montreal Protocol, the rules mentioned were of 1987. The rules mentioned that you have to progressively outlaw the use of these refrigerants, and the global community responded. Technology was transferred, and the best thing about this Montreal Protocol is that it is the protocol where the most number of countries have joined. And today, what we see is that there is progressive healing of the ozone layer. So this is one of the best known successful examples of global climate deliberations, you can call it, Montreal Protocol. Montreal Protocol outlawed this, and they started using another refrigerant known as HFC, hydrofluorocarbon. Okay, but what scientists saw that hydrofluorocarbon is not depleting the ozone layer, but it has very high global warming potential. Very high global warming potential. That is why scientists also suggested to this conference of parties to this Montreal Protocol that you have to outlaw this also, HFC. So there was an amendment in Kigali, which tried to do away with the use of hydrofluorocarbons. So they have set up some targets, like India has a target till by 2047 India has to move to a new type of refrigerant, right? So this is Kigali amendment to the Montreal Protocol. This happened in the year 2016. Fine. So this is the story about ozone layer. There are some other conventions which I want to pick up. There is a convention called Stockholm Convention. Convention of 2001. Stockholm Convention. What does the Stockholm Convention try to do? Stockholm Convention actually is about persistent. See, these are very important for the UPSC examination. They have asked it repeatedly. If you go through the segmented questions of environment, you'll see the repeated questions being asked on these things: Kyoto, Paris, Stockholm. You'll see Montreal. You see Rotterdam. I'll talk about Rotterdam also. You'll see these are persistently they have asked with these questions. They have repeatedly asked them. Okay, what is Stockholm Convention? Stockholm Convention is a convention in 2001 which talks about persistent organic pollutants. Okay, these pollutants are what? These are basically organic chemical substances. Just a minute, excuse me. These are what? These are organic chemical compounds. Organic chemical compounds. Okay. Basically, they are carbon-based compounds. Carbon-based compounds. What is the special characteristic of this persistent organic pollutants? Is the name persistent. persistent organic pollutants, they are basically volatile organic compounds, like carbon based compounds, or you can talk about, call them organic chemical compounds. What they do is that they persistently remain in the atmosphere for long periods, persistently remain in the atmosphere for long periods, and they are pollutants. So they disturb the basic atmospheric uh, constitution. Fine. They'll remain like for many years, many years. And what is special? Another thing special about this undergo bioaccumulation also. I have talked about in the last class about bioaccumulation. They undergo bioaccumulation, and if they undergo bioaccumulation, obviously you know that they'll also undergo biomagnification. And these pollutants, if they enter the body, they'll continue to deteriorate the bodily condition, bodily uh, conditions. Fine. So these are pollutants which harm this. Uh, uh, the What they do is that they try they try to bioaccumulate and biomagnify, and that is why they are dangerous for human beings. Fine. They have initially notified 12 POPs, persistent organic pollutants. There are pesticides such as aldrin, there even DDT, dichlorodiphenyl trichloroethane. This was also one of the compound. There is hexachlorobenzene. These are several compounds which have been mentioned as persistent organic pollutants. Okay. So this is the Stockholm Convention on persistent organic pollutants. Fine. Have you understood till here? Antara? Amir?
Yes, sir.
Amir? Amir? We do not. He's not hearing us maybe. Vishwaranjita has joined us. Have you understood this Stockholm Convention? Vishwaranjita?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Just a second. Just give me 1 second, okay? 1 second. Okay. Just another. We'll talk about two more conventions and then we'll leave for today. We'll talk about another convention known as the Basel Convention. Basel Convention. Right. So what is Basel Convention? Basel Convention was basically introduced in the year 1989. What happened prior to Basel Convention? I'll give you a story. What happened is that these developed countries, they actually developed a lot of waste, hazardous waste. Okay, waste, hazardous waste, and because they developed they have lots of industrialization capacity, and these industrialized countries developed a lot of hazardous waste. What they used to do is that they used to pay the lower developed countries, the lowly developed countries in Africa, and they used to transfer this hazardous waste to those countries. That is what they used to do. Okay, so countries around the world thought that this is a high exploitation of human life. Actually, if you do not have money, people are exploiting you with by transferring hazardous waste to you. So they came out with this convention known as the Basel Convention. And what this prohibits is the transboundary movement of hazardous waste is prohibited under this. So transboundary movement of hazardous waste is prohibited under this Basel Convention. This was introduced in the year 1989. Fine. Another convention is the Rotterdam Convention. Rotterdam Convention, it was introduced in the year 1998. What this Rotterdam Convention did is that this is related to transfer of pesticides and industrial chemicals. Okay, these are also hazardous chemicals. What are pesticides? You might, if pesticides are so hazardous, you might, I'll tell you a story. There is a train which takes passengers from Bhatinda, a place near Bhatinda in Punjab, to a place in it is, I guess it is in Rajasthan. Okay, there is a hospital, and around 60% of the passengers on that train are cancer patients, and this has happened due to ir, like uh, huge use of pesticides on their fields, because they spray pesticides using their small machines, and these pesticides come and enter their respiratory organs through the nasal passage, and they have developed cancer. Okay, and 60% of the train passengers are cancer patients. This is also known as the cancer train. You can search cancer train. So pesticides are harmful uh, chemicals. Industrial chemicals are also harmful chemicals. So if you have to transfer pesticides and industrial chemicals from country A to country B, you have to ask for a prior informed consent. Okay, you have to take the consent of this party B, and then only you can transfer these pesticides and industrial chemicals from country A to country B. And there is a clearing mechanism also. There is a clearing office which clears that yes, B has given me a permission, and then only A has sent these pesticides and industrial chemicals to this party. So the Rotterdam Convention actually legally mandates this thing. Okay, there is a legal mandate that you have to provide a prior informed, it's not only a prior consent, it is an informed consent also, prior informed consent to country A, so that they can transfer pesticides and industrial chemicals from country A to country B. Fine. So this is about Rotterdam Convention. There is a Minamata Convention also. Minamata Convention is actually basically about what? Basically about decreasing the use of mercury in mercury. Minamata disease is a disease related to excessive use of mercury. If you use in the areas of Shahdol and Singrauli in Madhya Pradesh, this disease has again cropped up, and because there are coal plants over there, and this has come into national debate also. Okay, Minamata Convention is another convention. So these are the conventions that you need to know. And okay, okay, these are the conventions basically you want to know. You have to know. We have talked about a lot of conventions, even of Triple C. We talked about Vienna. We have talked about Kyoto. We have talked about Paris. We have talked about Rotterdam, Basel. We have talked about Stockholm Convention also. So if you might one, two might be left. Even those are also important. You need to read through those also. But the important ones I have discussed. Okay. So have you understood till here? I'll
Yes,
see
sir.
if something is left. Okay, we have discussed most of the things that I planned to discuss today. So have you understood? Amir, what about you? You said
Yes, sir. Yes,
something?
sir. Got it.
You have got, I have understood. Okay. Antara, what about you?
Yes, sir.
You have understood, no? It was,
Yes.
it was nice, no? Understanding. Okay. Vishwaranjita, what about you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Okay, so then we'll leave here for today. Okay, we'll end here then. Thank you.